Let's say, however, though, you've made another way that modelers save time and efficiency is by using something called a mirror function. And so I'm going to go back into my object mode. I'll select the sphere and then delete it. So let's say I wanted to mirror this kind of goofy shape. And I wanted to mirror it, let's see, how would I want to mirror this goofy shape? Yeah, let's mirror it along this axis. So in order for modelers to cut down on labor, you're always looking for, like, if there's a symmetrical object that you're making, ways that you can do things once and then duplicate it. That symmetrical selection is one way to do that, but you can also model half of, like, let's say a human form or a human face, and then mirror that. So let's say I wanted to mirror this shape. I can select this shape, make sure I'm going back into my object mode, select the shape that I'd like to mirror, and then under my mesh menu, I can go down to my mirror and select mirror. So right now the cut geometry is turned on, and that's like if you want to reflect an object, and so you just want it to kind of switch in Maya, it's going to cut or delete the original geometry. I actually don't want to do that. I want it to kind of mirror to create one symmetrical object. So I'm going to turn cut geometry off. This axis position is saying mirror across the Z axis. So the Z axis is this way. So create a duplicate mirrored object along this Z axis. The axis position is either going to be world or around your bounding box or your object. You don't need to know too much about that, except for once you start rotating an object, the object's X, Y, and Z axis are not going to be in line with the world X, Y, and Z, right? So you can rotate an object and retain its kind of localized axis, which is going to be different than the world. You don't need to know, again, too much about that, as long as you're kind of keep that in mind if you're going into modeling. Usually you're going to be wanting to either use the world axis or the object axis. Okay, so that's mirroring across the Z. If I wanted to change that, I can change it to the Y, right, or to the X, and you can kind of see how that works. So I want to mirror across the Z axis, and then it's actually going to merge the duplicate with the original, so it's one single shape, and then it'll do that merging. Let's see if I can do this. It'll merge. It has a threshold at which it will merge faces. Let's see. Actually, I can't do that. See that here, but maybe if I translate. Okay. Yeah, so let's get into a single view so you can see. So at a certain point, you can kind of see it kind of lock in, and that's actually, it's not a great representation. Regardless, there is a threshold at 0.001 centimeter at which the faces will kind of become one. So I'm going to undo those rotations, and let's see. Polycube, perfect, go back, mesh, mirror, and then I want to mirror across the Z. I want to turn off the cut, and then it's kind of mirroring across that Z axis right down the center. All right, and that all looks good, and it's going to kind of give it a little bit of smoothing where it mirrors, which is great. All right, that all looks good, and then I can select my tool. Now if I go back into, let's say, my X-ray view where I'm just looking at the edges, I can go in and kind of double check to make sure that, yeah, indeed it looks like it's just those single faces. There's a couple different of these viewport options. These are more for texturing once we start getting into textures and image textures. Right now for modeling, the two that are going to be the most useful are the wireframe mode or the kind of polygonal solid mode. All right, so that's the mirror function. What else did I want to show to you? Let's get back into my soft select. I know. The extrude. So the other really useful thing is up until when we've pulled these faces out, we've just kind of pulled the faces along out of the shape, but you can do something that's actually going to add faces and kind of extrude out almost like like the way that I make like a cube here. It's an extrusion is almost kind of like that, like you're pulling faces out and it adds more faces around the face that you pull out. It's going to be more obvious to show you. So I'm going to go back into my attribute editor, into my poly shape, and then increase my subdivisions so I have more to work with. And then I'm going to go right click and say select face. I'm going to select that face, or down here. So without with a normal kind of, when I'm modeling and pulling, you can kind of see those faces like bend out with the face. But if I want to extrude, I can press Control E, and then I can change the offset here, which is going to give it like a little bit of a bevel here. I can say change the thickness, which is basically how far out I want to extrude, right? So it's given this is giving it a little bit of a bevel. I can take that bevel off, so that offset I can change now to 0, and it will just kind of pull out from the shape. There we go. Directly, and you can extrude both ways, right? So you can make like a little pocket, or you can extrude out, and it's actually adding these. Oh, I have soft selection, or the mirrored selection is still turned on. So this is a good reminder, right? So so it's always important to double check to make sure if you're getting some strange behaviors that you have your soft selection, or your soft selection turned off, and your symmetry turned off. So I'm going to reset to turn that off. And then I can extrude like out of the shape, and then do some fancy like transforms if I wanted the extrusion not to be like totally square. I can do that again, and let's say Control E for extrude, and then thickness, and then I can increase the divisions to give it joints along the way, right? So in case I wanted this object to kind of bend, and then the offset is going to make it kind of give it that taper, right? So it's either going to taper down or taper out. So that's the offset there. And then you can change the kind of thickness of the extrusion, but then you can also change the offset, which is going to be kind of like a stretching, right, of that kind of thickness that you pulled out. All right, so that I think is all I wanted to show you for the extrusion of the face. I can also, if I wanted to get like a more of a complex extrusion shape, I can actually use a curve and follow that curve. So I'm going to do that by going into my quad view here. So the curve tool is under the curve tab, and it's this pencil. I'm going to draw the curve with my pencil. It's going to draw flat with whatever plane I'm is highlighted. So if I'm in perspective, it's actually going to draw this kind of funny like angled curve that is flat with my camera view and my perspective, which I don't want. I actually want to draw, I want to kind of maybe make a handle on this shape. So I'm going to draw from my side view, and I'm going to maybe go back and change my view to the single view so it's bigger so I can see it, and go into orthographic and side. And then I can draw a funny curvy shape. And it's going to extrude along from where you started with your pencil to where you ended. So I'm going to go back in and into my quad view here and try to get this this shape a little bit closer. I should have maybe started drawing a little bit closer. So now I can see that it's actually penetrating kind of inside of my shape, and that looks good. And now I'm going to select my shape. So my curve is still selected, right? I'm going to select the face that I want to extrude, and then I'm going to hold down Shift with on my keyboard, and then left click to select the curve. And is that right? Control E. Let's see. Escape. Sorry. Maybe it's edit mesh, extrude. No. Go back into object mode. Select my object. Go into right click, select face, select the face, shift, okay, there we go. I think the curve was still selected when I went in and selected the face the last time, so order of operation is really important. So make sure that nothing's selected, and go back in. If you're not already in, go into your face selection mode, select your face that you'd like to extrude, and then hold down shift and select the curve. It should be highlighted in aqua without the kind of curve vertices highlighted. And then let's try that Control E again. And so it's going to, in the first case, it's going to extrude your face to the end of the curve. In order to create for it to follow that path, you actually have to increase those divisions, right? So those joints, so that it follows the path. So if you make two, basically, if you say two divisions, or two kind of sides of the joint, it will connect to the middle of the curve. But as you increase, you'll start to see more. It'll start following the curve, and then it kind of tops out at 25 subdivisions, which is not enough, but I can always type in something like 100. And now I'm getting more of a kind of an accurate curvature, so all the faces are kind of following the curve. If you need more detail, you can always type in 500. But it's always better, remember, in Maya to only use as many faces as you absolutely need for computational efficiency's sake. So I don't think I actually need that. Maybe 150 is probably enough. That looks good. All right, so now I have, let me go back into my perspective mode. So now I have, in my object mode, this single shape that has an extruded face that was subdivided but that follows my curve, right? So that's a great way to get complex shapes. And I just extruded a cube, but you can extrude like a round face, or you can, let's see, go into polymodeling, and I can make, let's say, I wanted more of like a worm shape. I can make a cylinder. I can go into my P cylinder tab and then a poly tab here, and I can say I don't want to subdivide my cap at all. So this subdivision of the cap allows me to turn subdivisions of my cap off, so I have a single face. And I could do the same thing. I could go into my quad view and say go into my curve and say I wanted to make, again, like a kind of a wormy shape. It could, and then, so see, I've kind of drawn, this is why the quad view is really important. So it looks good from this front view, but I'm nowhere near it in my side view. So I'm going to move I can either move my cylinder or move my curve closer to my cylinder's face. And I want to kind of center it on the face and make sure it's centered this way. There we go. And now I can select my cylinder, go in and hold into my face mode, select the face, hold down shift and select the curve, and Control E for extrude, and then increase those divisions. And now I've got kind of more of a worm, and see how it's kind of folding in on itself. I know for this one I'd probably need to increase the divisions quite a bit here. So maybe 150 again. And there we go, it's starting to look a little bit better. Okay, so for things like tails, worms, maybe like a wormy arm, that extrude along a curve is a really useful modeling tool. So the next thing is actually kind of not technically polygonal modeling, it's sculpting. I'm going to go back into object mode. And maybe I'll just move all of these out of the way. And I'll just delete them. I don't need to be sentimental about those.